Multifamily investors, this is the show for you. We've got the legend here, Veena Jetti, on the show. You've been making an absolute massive moves in the multifamily space. You're on every stage possible that I've ever, we were just at Wealth Genius a little while ago, crushing it there. I don't know how many times you spoke on that stage. They couldn't get you off. And man, the audience was diving into what you were saying. So I realized I had to have you on the show, pick your brain about so many topics. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. It'll be a continuation from Wealth Genius.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Now I know. So let's talk multifamily, guys. So you've raised millions and millions in multifamily. And one of the things that I learned, a very hard lesson, is around, my first multifamily I bought was, the same mistake that most people make. You go and you buy that duplex and you buy yourself a job. And so in fact, I have a tenant who is now complaining about their washing machine. And you're thinking, why am I doing this thing? And this
Yeah.
makes you suffer so bad.
Yeah.
And so you look at it and you realize that just over the horizon is this beautiful multifamily that's big enough to attract attention. It's big enough to attract labor. It's big enough to attract all of these things. And it's really, truly a big business. But in order to get there, you need capital. And me, as somebody who has a mortgage business where we lend in Canada and the US on these big properties, you see that it's relatively it's a relatively nice way to structure getting capital, both on the debt side, but also on the equity side. And you've done a great job of raising capital. So first of all, congratulations on that. But second of all, what's the key to success for you?
Honestly, it is showing up every day over and over and over, even when things don't work, even when it is frustrating or you feel like you are failing, which happens routinely as you grow. It's continuing to show up. So I think I read a study and I can't remember where the study was, but basically what it was saying is the number one determinant of success in entrepreneurs is one quality, and it's not education, it's not wealth, it's not socioeconomic background, it's none of those things. It is grit, it is perseverance and determination. And have you ever seen that meme, which is like, it's a cartoon, right? And it shows like this guy with a pickaxe who's like digging a tunnel to try to get to like gold or water or something valuable on the other side of it. And he quits, and it's like this really thin wall. I don't know why that image is like seared into my mind, but I always think of that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've come so far. I could quit now. What if just one more time is the time I need to get there and to win? And so I think like just having that attitude, and I'm like that with everything. Like my mom always said since I was little, she's like, if Veena has a bee in her bonnet, like she's a boomer. Okay. So, but she'll say this and she'll be like, oh, yep, there's no stopping her. If she says she's going to do it and she puts her mind to it, it will get done because she will not stop running at this until she gets it done. And, I'm proud and terrified that I'm raising two daughters that have this same mentality built into them.
And it's so fun to watch them at their age. They're
Yeah.
5 and
Yeah.
they're just blossoming. That's amazing. When you look at that and you look at your parents and you look at the environment you grew up in, where did that grit for you come from?
I'm definitely from both of my parents, but especially my mom. So I'm the daughter of immigrants. Both my parents immigrated here in 1980. So they've been in this country about 45 years now. So that means now they've lived in the US longer than they've lived in any other place. So they're solidly planted here. But when you grow up, the daughter of immigrants, there is very much this like scarcity mentality around money. And rightfully so, right? They came here without knowing anybody, without having anything. They brought $26 was all they had when they came here. And a dream. Like they were there was no internet back then. They didn't know anybody here. They couldn't join a Facebook group to learn everything there was about moving to America. They left their culture and their friends and their family and they moved 3,000 miles just for an opportunity at a better life. And I think for me, I feel that responsibility of the opportunity my parents sacrificed to give my sister and I. And I know that we're very lucky and very privileged to have that opportunity because there are a lot of people who are just as deserving as we were of an opportunity, but don't get that opportunity. And so I feel this really deep sense of responsibility to make sure that we are using the tools that someone before us sacrificed to take that next step on, the family generations. Um, I hope my daughters do that too. But they say like shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's tough. I know before I'm doing what I'm doing now, we would build houses for, a lot of mega wealthy people, and first generation hardworking, second generation maybe, third generation a coke habit.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see that happen. And there's certainly you'd see amazing parents, and you'd see this challenge come out, and then you don't know how you could save yourself. I mean, I've got 3 kids, and I'm hoping that we do things right, but you never know. One of the things that when you talk about grit is great. It's like good behavior. Behavior shows up when things is easy, but when things get hard, that's when people really get tested. What was one moment in your career thus far that where your grit was truly tested?
Gosh, I have a bajillion examples that come to mind. And I think that would be true for any entrepreneur who has built a business and had any kind of success. And I always talk about this, right? People shy away from failure, but it is a stepping stone to success. You cannot have success without some amount of failure. It's just that simple. So I'll tell you, like, actually, in real time right now, I am actually at like the tail end of an intense period of burnout, which okay, so I didn't know burnout is like an actual real thing. I thought burnout was something someone said when they were like feeling tired. You know how you're like, "Oh, I'm so depressed. My favorite football team lost," right? Like that's what I thought people meant when they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm burnt out." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, me too. I'm tired." And then I was coaching with Rosie Noel, who's my mindset coach, and I told you before the show, I coach with her at least 3 times a week. I try to get her 5 times a week if I can, but she has like other clients or something. But I was coaching with her and I was like sharing something about, I don't even remember. I was like something about like day to day. And I was like, yeah, I'm like really not looking forward to fill in the blank on something that an extrovert loves. And I'm the most extreme extrovert ever. Right. And so she was like, wait, say more things about this. And she like kept prodding and asking me to expand on it. And then she said, I think you're burnt out. And I go, duh, Rosie. I'm like, I am tired. Yes, I am burnt out. She's like, no, no, I think you're actually burnt out. And for context, she is a high performance coach. She came from a 10,000 employee company where she coached their like director level and C suite. So she's like high performance and deeply pedigreed in the corporate world too. And now she coaches entrepreneurs, but she's like, no, 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 this is like real burnout. And I was like, wait, this is a thing? This isn't like just a word people say?
So what is the difference between that sort of feeling of tired and real burn?
Yeah, so like tired and exhaustion is like temporary and small and isolated. When you're actually like burnt out, it can spread. And the way she described it was if you think about like depression, and she's not like a therapist or psychologist or anything, so take this also with a grain of salt, right? But when you think about depression, it's like that feeling of like not looking forward to things you that would have otherwise brought you joy. It's like the feeling of not being fulfilled and not feeling rewarded from work that matters. And even when you have success, it's like kind of dulled and dim. And and I'm not somebody that suffers from depression, so I can't really fathom what that feels like, but it's some on depression as it relates specifically to work, employment, and I run 100 miles an hour and I've been doing it for a really long time now. So she's like, it kind of makes sense that you're in this burnout phase.
And what key tool sets did she give you in this last little bit to help not
Yeah.
only identify, but also
Oh, to work
address
on
and move
it.
forward? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like at the tail end. I can feel it. Like I feel myself, like the colors coming back to my cheeks, right? Like I can feel that. So I'm excited about it. So the first and most important tool was the awareness around it because can't solve a problem you don't know you have. And so just one, being able to acknowledge it and recognize it was life changing. Then she actually gave me this podcast. So there's these twin sisters that wrote a book, and I don't know the name of the book off the top of my head, but I'll send it to you so you can drop it in show notes.
There we go.
But she sent me this podcast that they did, and it talked about burnout. And one of the really interesting things about it is you can't grit your way through burnout, which makes it hard for someone like me because I was like, oh, okay, I'll just double down and work twice as hard. And it doesn't work like that, because if you do that, you actually put yourself backward. And so one of the interesting things I learned was you actually have to like go through it, and you have to let it actually close the loop on the cycle in order to be able to overcome it. So it's not as simple as like, oh, let me take like a self-care day and go to the spa or go golf or whatever it is you do. It's like the actual moving through the emotions and giving yourself time and space to recalibrate and adjust. And so like I this happened to coincide with, it was like a month before I left on a month-long trip to India that I had planned to take my kids to meet their great grandmother. And so I got a lot more downtime than usual there because I had already planned my schedule to be lighter, but I was still working. And so I was, working through the burnout that I had had. But I'm now a month after being back, I can feel it dissipating significantly now.
So was it the downtime that did that, or was it the focus on thinking about how you're going to address it?
I think it's both, right? The downtime allowed me the space and time and energy to really address what wasn't feeling in alignment, because that's like a big piece of it, right? Like part of what it was is I don't think everything I was doing felt in alignment or authentic to me. And I was struggling with that for a long time. And now I've just decided that that's not how I want to live anymore. Like, I want to do and talk about and say and be things that feel good to me. And I also recognize now that this is not something like I can continue to change. I can have another version of me in another year or 5 years or 10 years. And that's okay. I don't have to stay the same. And it's crazy that it took all of this for me to really get there, because I always say, like, when I speak on these stages, right, I'll say, like, how you start isn't how you have to finish. You can change at any time. And I gave other people permission to do that, but I never gave it to myself for some reason.
Do you think that's what gave the burnout, was that you felt you were in a rut and there was no deviation out of that?
Probably. Yeah, I do. I felt like I couldn't, because I had such a strong commitment to what I've been building, right? And our employees rely on us, our investors, my family, right? Like, I support my family with the money that we make. And so I just felt this sense of responsibility that was so deep that I didn't feel like I could shift or pivot. And really what I needed to do was realign within the framework of what I've already been doing, but just make some minor changes so it felt better to me for where we were and where I wanted to go.
I know it's really important to you to look at, people who are in a disadvantaged positions, people who are maybe in a minority position, where, the diversity is working against them, or economically they're in a tough situation. So if we put this idea in the front of somebody who's, say it's Susan, she's got two kids, she's a single mom, she's running her pottery school, and she's working 24/7, it feels like, because when she's not working at the school, she's working at home, and she's going through that same feeling where she's feeling stuck in a rut, and she doesn't have the ability to say, I'm going to go off and take some time
Yeah.
downtime, because if she does, she's not making ends
Yeah.
meet.
Yeah.
How does she still maintain those obligations but also address that feeling of burnout?
Yeah. I think one, it's just recognizing that you are burnt out. Two, it's creating the support network around you. So, today we're in a day and age where there's more resources than there have ever been available at our fingertips, right? Like, we all carry it around in our pocket. And now with the evolution of AI, anybody can really access mental health care. And obviously, it's not ideal if you're like talking to ChatGPT instead of a therapist, but it's also prudent to recognize that mental health care is not available to everybody in the US. It's not readily available, nor is it cheap. I mean, even for us, like, we have insurance, and I think I spent like $350 an hour out of pocket to pay for mental health care to help me address my burnout. And I don't think that that's affordable for most people. I don't think that's within
No.
reach for most people. And so,
You Yeah, and you bring up AI, and the one caveat around the AI is know that it's being programmed by somebody. And
yes.
just like you choose a therapist based on, or a performance coach based on the
Yeah.
research who wrote that GPT, or researcher wrote that algorithm, because I've spoken to people where they didn't even realize that it was written by somebody. They just thought it was a thing. And you got to know what's the driving factor behind it, what's the methodology, and is that methodology going to be the thing that's going to get in tune with you?
I agree. And I think there's a lot of more affordable or sliding scale or free resources available today than there have ever been. I know that Rosie, who's my mindset coach, right? She does free sessions where she will, and for this exact reason, to make it accessible. So she'll do like free group coaching that you can go to and you can learn. And, I think all of us have done some amount of free trainings because it's so important, at least for me, right? It's really important that I don't have a paywall in front of everything. Otherwise, people who are the most disadvantaged will never get an opportunity to be in these rooms. So, I would say if you really want to dive into it, find somebody that is offering low cost or free resources for you to dive into and be able to really immerse yourself in. Find a support network. And this is so much easier said than done when you are in the thick of young children motherhood and you are a single mom and you are the provider. There is so much mental energy and unpaid labor you do that it can be really challenging. And this is why, they always say like self care is so important because you have to put your oxygen mask on first. Otherwise, if you go down, your children are completely dependent on you. And, it's like the pressure, but also the reason to reprioritize. And I think this is also why having other women who understand what you're going through around you, whether they're in your field or your business or anything, that doesn't matter. What really matters is that they uplift you, they support you, they cheerlead you, they're non-competitive, right? That's the way you really can piecemeal your way through the burnout.
Yeah, I think that's so critically important, especially in this post-lockdown COVID environment where so many people have got so insular in the way that they don't reach out and talk to people. The amount of women that I see in the real estate space where you're transacting, we own a mortgage business, and you see they never leave their house. They don't go out and engage in the community as much as they did prior to the lockdowns. And all of that, I think, has led to a lowering level of connection with people. And I think while AI is awesome and it can do so many different things, it never will replace the importance of human connection.
I agree. And it can be dangerous in that way too, right? Like a lot of people don't address the fact that AI can feel very real and it can be dangerous in that way because, to your point, you don't necessarily know who is training it or how it's learning, right? And now it's starting to get to a point where it's more advanced and it's learning from itself. So it's not foolproof. And, especially like young kids or people that struggle with mental health, they're more susceptible to the vulnerabilities that come from AI. So just, word of caution for anybody who is using it. But if that's the only tool you have available to you, then I think it is better than not addressing
I
it.
totally agree. Now, when we talk about people who maybe aren't in the situation that they're burnout, but they're more in the situation of they want to get into action and they feel like they're running into walls. They feel like they're not getting into the rooms that they want to be getting into. So, this again, we'll just really just talk about women because I think it's really important. I work with a lot of women who have done a great job of building out their careers and well balancing family life, and I give them so much accolades for what they do. But they do so much,
Mhm.
like so much. And how do women handle that? Like, you just talk to me as a dude so I can understand
How do they handle doing so much?
that.
That's a good question. People always ask me, like, oh, how do you balance it all? And I mean, the reality is, I don't. I can't balance it all. In order to operate on everything that I do alone, it's impossible for any one human. So the reality is, I have a lot of resources, I have a lot of family around me. I have built my life by design, like very specifically. One, I have a very supportive, involved husband who is not only an incredible father, but he's an incredible partner to me. And that alone gets rid of like the vast majority of stress and struggle that a lot of women face. But then also, I have four very involved, active grandparents. I bought two houses in my neighborhood so that they could live a 10-minute walk from me. Very strategic, right? And they see my kids every day. Every single day, my kids see between one and four grandparents. And I think that's really special. And that is a different level of stress relief. I have nannies. I will order delivery of groceries. So I rely on a lot of services, and that's how I balance it all. But the reality is I do it poorly, right? Because when I'm here and I'm doing work related stuff, my kids are in Montessori, right? Someone else is taking care of them and pouring into them and nurturing them. And when I'm with my kids for dinner time and bedtime and all these things, someone else is running my business and taking care of my business. And I'm very grateful to have teams and villages around me that support me in all of these different arenas and aspects. And it's hard right now, especially because America is a very individualistic society. We don't live in communes and compounds anymore like we used to, right? And, I'm Indian by ethnicity, and we're a very communal
Hmm.
of America, right? So, like, there is a very strong cultural aspect of how we're raised to take care of our parents and take care of our kids and our brothers and our sisters and even strangers we don't know, right? Indian people will do business with Indian people because we share this one commonality that, I don't know if it means anything or not, but it does enough to have that needle move forward. And so it's there's community, and community is absolutely the key to being at any level of true success. It is very hard to do it without community.
I would take it if I were going to take it more into a business term, and the community certainly is used a lot in a business environment, but I would use the word leverage. And the reason why leverage is really important because a lot of people say you can make it a limited amount of time, but you can't make it unlimited amount of hours. You only have certain hours in a day. And I think that's not true because while I have 24 hours in the day, if I get somebody else to do 3 hours of a task, well, I just bought 3 hours back.
Yeah.
And if I get five people to do that, now I get 15 hours. And I've got 10 people doing that now, it escalates. And so you can actually get an amplification on your hours just through the idea of leverage. And then those people get the leverage from you. And so it's this mutual relationship of leverage between the two of you.
I never really thought about it like that. So one, thank you for that perspective because I do appreciate that. I think the piece that is hard for me at least to reconcile, because yes, that's generally true from like a business perspective, right? But then there are certain aspects of what I do, right? Whether it's at home or at work, I can't outsource it, right? I can outsource all these other things, but there's still like I cannot be on two stages at the same time. I would love to be, I can't. So I have to make some choices and sacrifices one way or the other, right? And same thing with like traveling to the location. So for me to get to Toronto, I still have to get on a plane and fly there. I can't hire that out. But to your point, it's easier now more than ever to leverage tasks you don't want to do, that you don't need to be involved with, and that you don't like to do. Like, I haven't done a dish in like 7 years because I hate doing dishes. I just refuse to do that. I have my housekeepers. I have someone who comes to my house every day to refresh and reset my house. My husband does dishes really well. My mother in law, my mom, literally everyone else does dishes. I do not do dishes.
Well, and that's where the leverage is bilateral because I had a client, we were building their house. We actually didn't do the house, but we did this greenhouse. So it was a
Mhm.
pool with a greenhouse over top. It was this beautiful indoor pool. And I was talking with his dad about because his son was just we actually did a project for him and his son. And his son was just one of the most amazing, and this is second generation money. This is where usually we think the problems arise. And he was raised with a silver spoon. But he was the most genuine, amazing individual that you could possibly ever know. And I'm like, how did you create this individual?
Yes.
Like, how did this happen? And I said, did you teach him hard work? Did you give him the grind? He said, no. I actually, what I did is I made his life as easy as humanly possible. The maid made his bed.
Yeah.
Everything was always made for me. He didn't have to make his lunches. Didn't have to do anything. He always had a butler. Like always had anything that he ever wanted. He always had. But he knew he had a duty of responsibility because he knew that those people relied on him. So when it was his turn to provide, is his role and responsibility to provide so they can provide for him.
Gosh.
And so
Yeah.
that relationship back and forth, the duality of that relationship, I think it's the master slave relationship from, I think it's Thomas Hobbes or Aquinas that really talks about that, is that there's a duality to that relationship and both owes a duty of responsibility.
Okay, I really love that. Thank you for sharing that because this is something that is top of mind for me, especially as my girls get older, because I see them. acting in these like really entitled ways. And I'm like, baby, you did not earn this. You won the birth lottery. That's
Yeah.
it. You did
Yep.
not earn your place here yet. And I worry that the maids and the nannies and, this and that and the vacations and all the things, right? I'm worried that that is going to spoil them. But I think you're right. I think what I've been missing is explaining to them that the people that we employ also rely on us to take care of their families and like really go into that. So that's what I'm going to do now. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thank him actually. It was he's just they were amazing human beings.
Love that.
And I mean we all have kids and they're always growing up and we try to give them the best path possible and I try to learn from the best and to me it was them was just the idea that there's a responsibility.
Yeah.
And if you can play that responsibility, and if your responsibility is cleaning the toilets, well, that's your responsibility. But if your responsibility is leadership, then you got to take that very seriously too.
Yeah. I
And
love
so if
that.
you can teach them both, I think that's really important.
I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I won't ruin my kids after all.
We'll catch up in 10 years and
Yeah,
see how
absolutely.
things are going. Because they'll be at that perfect 15 where you're like,
My
oh,
gosh, or they will be. Well, I survived. They're already asking me for a phone. They've been asking me since they were 3 for a phone.
I
When am
know
I
it's
getting a
crazy.
phone? Literally never. That's when you're
We
getting.
did we did when they started to traverse large distances.
Yeah,
And then we thought it's just a good safety mechanism because we always kind of see where they are,
yeah.
but it's a hard call because that thing is programmatically designed to be addictive. And as soon as they get on it, it's you're fighting it for the rest of your life.
And so we got them iPads for Christmas last year. And really, they were a gift for me because I was going to be traveling with them to India. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, you need iPads,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
So I got them iPads and we told them, like, this is only for special occasions, for trips. Cause, like, we're not a big electronics family. Like, even my husband and I, we're not a family that like turns the TV on as soon as we come home.
Mhm.
We're not a family that like sits on our phone and like when we're together, we're just spending quality time together. And I just noticed from the time they got their iPads, their behavior just like it became like a drug for them.
Very much so.
Everything was like, "Can we have iPad time? Can we have iPad time?" And I'm like, "Maybe if you make good choices." And then they'd be like, "Oh, okay, we made a good choice. Did we get?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you are already addicted to this, and I do not like this. Like, I want you to be able to go without electronics for much longer than you can right now."
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things most parents are dealing with right now because not only are you fighting it with your kids, you're fighting with the parents of other kids because your kids now are the ones not on the device while the other kids are, and now
Yes,
they're being ostracized
yes,
because they're not on the device.
yes.
And it's a very hard battle. And I don't know what the right answer is on that one yet, other than just getting them really super busy doing as many things as possible outside of being on those devices.
I hope so. I mean, because I will not last very long if they keep pressuring
Mhm.
me like this because it's so much.
Well, there is a caveat around all of that, and if you look to the future, say we go 20 years to the future, and Elon Musk, he's moved off of Doge and he's now onto neural networks again, and we talk about the integration of technology with human through either the quantum computing movement or through bio electronics and that sort of thing, where we really become integrated into technology or technology integrated into us if they don't have that early introduction into it, then they have a harder play later on in life. And those skills that they learn now on how to use things could maybe give them advantageous moments later on, even though today we might think it's disadvantageous. And I don't know the
Do
answer on
agree
that.
with that generally. So I talk to them like we explore ChatGPT together because I want them to know what prompt engineering is. I want them to understand chaining, right? So we do explore that together a lot right now. And I try to like model the curiosity and then how do we solve for whatever we're trying to figure out that maybe mommy doesn't know yet. But to your point, I also have them like there's this app on their iPad and it's like for coding and it's like a video
A
game.
Scratch or
Yeah, it's like one of those. It's called like
yeah.
Code Spark, maybe.
Okay, yeah, Code Spark, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it like teaches them how to code while they play a game. And I'm like, oh, great, you can learn how to code because I want them to do productive things. But really, what they want to do is they want to watch like these YouTube videos of people playing with the toys that are literally sitting in their playroom upstairs. And I'm like, why don't you just go play with the actual toys? They're like, no, we want to watch them play.
Well, they get the dopamine dump without the work.
My gosh, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts, and again, it just comes down to like the idea of balance, I think, and you have to balance
Yeah.
that exposure to that protection.
Yeah.
And eventually that balance has to start to open as they, I mean, my oldest is 15 and now you have to let them start to fail. And
Yeah.
that's probably one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a hard, honestly, the thing that scares me the most about technology with them is social media, because it's just like brain rot. And also, especially for girls, their self esteem just takes a massive hit. The kids that get cell phones early on and social media early on have just like more anxiety. There's a guy, I don't know if you follow him, Officer Gomez on Facebook. Oh,
Yeah.
he's great. He's like a resource officer, but he does a lot around tech safety, and he talks about like how to handle all these different apps. And he's like, listen, don't try to outsmart your kid, because they have 24/7 tech support when they're at school. All their friends are telling them all of the things, and they're troubleshooting and they're moving fast. So you will never be able to keep up. Do not try to do that. Instead, we have to like give them responsibility and teach them the guidelines and the parameters, and create these really strong bonds with them, so that if or when they do find themselves in trouble, they can come to us and we can help them navigate it.
You know, we went through that with our kids where we put up the firewalls and the family link and all that other stuff. And then you see that they actually still get on because you catch them at one point and
Yeah.
they get under their phone. And because they found that they could put on airplane mode and then go onto the, and they found
Yeah.
all these little hacks.
Yes.
And while you're slightly upset that they did that, you're also like just a little bit proud.
I'm like, even when they like negotiate with me, I'm like, I'm really proud of you, but also like, don't use it against me.
That's right. My son said to me, he's like, I thought you wanted me to stand up for myself. And
I'm
you're
like,
like, I
yes, just
do,
to me.
just not right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And he's like, isn't that when it matters most? I'm like,
No,
God,
no.
you're right, but you're wrong.
But also no. Yeah.
That's right.
It's so funny.
Now, I want to pivot back into the idea of talking about you not only as a person, as a mom, but as a businesswoman, because I think you've done so much. You speak so much to people, and one of the things I thought was really interesting is when you start talking around the idea of ethical investment. I mean, I was just down in Cleveland a little while ago looking at multifamily. There's a lot of neighborhoods that need a lot of gentrification, a lot of work, while still making it affordable for the people who live there. How do you go into one of those things where you're talking about capital raising and we're going to get you this massive returns? We're going to boot all those people from the homes they lived there for 30 years and we're going to get you those updated rents and really get that sweet cap rate up.
Yeah. So I think that it is a challenge, right? Because on the one hand, my most important directive or focus is always going to be to my investors, right? Because they're the ones that are the lifeblood of any investment company. And so delivering a strong, healthy IRR and return to investors is absolutely without question the focus. With that being said, I also choose to invest in projects and in areas where we would not be taking advantage of populations that maybe can't afford basic housing needs, right? So we don't invest in Section 8. You can make a lot of money in it, but it's not something that I do. It's just not in our wheelhouse, if you will. All of the assets that we focus on typically will have about $100,000 or more median income in the area. So if they're a little bit more of a solid tenant base, typically our target tenant is going to be somebody that is saving up for a down payment and then moving into a house. So they're
So
good.
then you're using that natural selection that they're deselecting themselves out of the property, and at that point you can up the rents as necessary.
Correct. And then, to take that even a step further, right? Outside of the multifamily investment specifically, I do a lot to make sure I'm giving back to causes that help support communities that aren't as advantaged, right? So I like, for example, I like judge a science fair at a local school that is predominantly Spanish speaking. I go and speak at a high school every year. I go and speak at one of the largest high schools and high school fairs about career options. And that's predominantly to brown and black kids. And, we donate to various causes that support missions that are in alignment with what I'm trying to do. I have my kids go and volunteer. We just did the world's largest toy drive last year. We did the Dallas chapter, and I think we ended up donating something like 10,000 plus toys. And it
Well,
wasn't just me, it was a whole community.
yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, I think that's important because I think a lot of times, I mean, this is the Money Mindset Mentoring podcast, and money mindset, I think, is one of the most important things that people need to be able to reconcile. And what you've done is you really said, look, I have a duty and a responsibility, a fiduciary duty to my investors to ensure that I'm, producing the highest return. And I'm going to do that through a way that I deem as ethical because I'm attacking a market that I believe is one that gives me the returns, but also allows me to be ethical in the process that I don't have to make those hard decisions. But that being said, is you look at the not only the money that you make, but the impact of the money that you make, because after that return is made, you then can self-select where the direction of where those funds go and really create impact. And
Yeah,
you're not actually mixing the two together, but rather succeeding in one so you can make the other.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing, right? Is knowing that I am capitalizing on one thing over here doesn't mean that my impact has to stop there. I can make up for it on the other side. So, like, I have this little thing that I do, a ritual I've been doing for years now, um, where every time I close a deal, we donate to charity. It used to be where I donate to charity and buy myself a Chanel bag because I was a bag person, but now that I have kids, I'm like, "Oh, I'd rather go and, like, experience something with the kids instead." So, I don't do the Chanel bag anymore, but I still do donate, just to, like, celebrate the closing and make sure I'm giving back in a way that's tangible immediately.
I love how you talk about giving up the Chanel bag because there was a podcast that I listened to that the one fellow talked about this. He said that most people think material things are the things that last because you can physically see them, and experiences are for the moment. But what you realize is those material things, they break, they obsolete, and they go away. You sell them and they're gone, where the experiences stay with you for a lifetime. And that's why they're so much more important.
They also build more relationships, more love, more trust, more camaraderie. Like, there's just so many positive, intangible benefits of experience. Like, I would much rather take $5,000, go on a great trip with my kids for like a weekend than spend $5,000 on a bag. Like, how many bags am I going to wear? Number one. Number two, like, what am I paying for? I'm paying for a brand name that someone else has deemed is valuable beyond what, and I'm like, I like the bags, which is why I bought them. Like, I really thought they were beautiful and the craftsmanship was great. The quality has declined significantly because everyone's trying to get their margins up. So that's number one. And then two, I can do so much more with that money. eh, I can go and I can feed an entire food pantry for like a day or two or three or five with that same amount of money. And it's just like, as you get more and more success, I think the things that are important to you kind of change, right? And I do think a part of it was when I was younger, right? It was like, oh, this is how I know I made it, is I can afford to do these things. And now I'm like, don't really care if someone knows I made it or not. In fact, I would rather you think that I'm just like the average person walking down the street. That's much
Yep.
better and safer for me and my children. And I don't want to impress anybody else. I don't care about that. I care about impressing myself, and I care about, my family being happy and healthy, and like that's what really matters. And I think having children is what absolutely changed that perspective for me, like almost like a light bulb. Because when Vivana, my twin A, was 10 weeks old, she was diagnosed with a liver tumor. And at the time, they diagnosed it as a hepatoblastoma, which is a pediatric cancer. And I mean, I remember that moment like it happened yesterday. And that's something that money does not necessarily make better. And I was able to do a lot more because of our money and our resources, so I'm very grateful for that. But ultimately, when you have something like that you're up against, cancer doesn't care how rich you are, it doesn't care how many Chanel bags you have, none of that matters. And that for me, I think was like a big turning point where I was like, oh, this isn't the stuff that's important. This isn't what matters. What matters is the time, the energy, the love, the happiness, the pure joy I have with my family.
That's so critically important. And I think a lot of times people say money can change you. You know, my fundamental belief is money really will just amplify who you really are because you just maybe just didn't have the option to make the choices that you're going to make. And now that you have the options, you're really going to show who you're actually really are.
Absolutely. And let me close the loop. She actually ended up, the tumor ended up being benign. So
That's
very
good.
lucky and very grateful. And again, it was community that really helped get us there. One of my investors is the one who helped us diagnose her properly. And I'm just really grateful that I had so many people that intervened to help, and she's healthy and thriving now.
Well, that's interesting that you talk about the investor who helped you because that's not a money situation, that's a proximity situation.
It is.
And that is super interesting. And good for you to have that.
Multiple investors stepped up, and they reviewed. I have a lot of doctors that invest with me, and so they like reviewed her cases. I had one investor who rallied a group of 14 other specialists to look at her case and decide what to do there. I had another investor who made a phone call to a specialist that I couldn't get into, and he called and said, hey, this is Dr. So and so from wherever. I'm a GI specialist. I have a very close friend. I need you to see her. She can't get in for 6 months, but you need to see her daughter right away. I need professional courtesy here. And 2 days later, I was sitting in that doctor's office
That's
with my
amazing.
daughter.
Now, again, we talked a little bit about the duality relationship of, parents with their kids or their kids with the people that support themselves, such as the nanny and that sort of thing. Let's talk about that relationship with the investors because what they just did is they really did a wonderful job of reaching back out to you and making sure that you're looked after. I want to talk a little bit about this past 3 to 5 years where we've gone through this pretty dramatic cycle and where they're looking to you and saying, are we okay? And number one, what did you do to protect them? Number two, how close to the threshold did you get in some of those situations where there's some precarious moments and just kind of give a little bit of landscape around that.
Yeah, so we actually have always been on the conservative side. Even back in like 2020, 2021, before interest rates were going up, you were throwing a dart at the wall and making stupid money, right? Even then, we were really conservative. I remember we would have like colleagues or investors looking at deals, and they'd almost like ridicule us because back in 2021, we were underwriting for an increase on interest rates. They were like, "Are you crazy? Interest rates aren't going up." Oh, like all this stuff, and we even got it wrong there, right? We slowly increased interest rates over 2 years, and that's not what ended up happening. It went sharply up. So we were right. We just were wrong about the timing and how fast they would go up. So, that in and of itself helped insulate us significantly. Like I said, we also went into assets that were more moderate, stabilized assets, not really tough assets. We were in great locations. As far as like getting close to the edge, I mean, yeah, all of our assets have had one challenge or another, and that's true even in the best of times. All of our assets today are performing. We have one asset that is absolutely my challenging asset. It is the one that you can like see all of my gray hairs from. But I think the thing that we do really well is we always make sure to communicate with investors. And this is the biggest thing I can say to anybody who is raising capital or managing anybody else's money. Communication is the gold standard for anything that you do. And when you think you've communicated enough, double the amount of communication you're providing because it's not enough. And investors just want to know. And look, my experience too is that investors, and I'm an investor too, right? Investors are okay with bad news. They know that this was not a guarantee. If you've done your job correctly, they knew there was risk going into it. They are willing to risk this money anyway and invest for a chance at a bigger return. The absolute key to that, though, is making sure you're communicating what is happening and why it's happening. So investors will put up with a what if you give them a why. So What we're doing is we're pausing distributions, we're making a capital call, we're bringing in another partner, we're putting pref equity on the deal, whatever that looks like. That's the what. Explain to them why. The asset is struggling, the market is softer, market rents are softer, cap rates expanded, interest rates are too high, our rate cap is expiring, whatever it is, right? Tell them and be transparent and be honest and be vulnerable and authentic and communicate often, communicate early.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think too many times people assume that they're bothering somebody by giving them information or that they're just going to mishandle the information. So better just we'll wait until we get better news. And that strategy, I don't think has ever worked.
No, I know this specifically because I tried that once. Back when COVID hit, it was so chaotic because everything was moving so fast. And also, I'm married to a frontline physician. So I had like this whole other set of stressors that I'm like, is my husband about to die? Like, what's going to happen? Right. And when COVID hit, I had partners on the deal that we were not in alignment on how we should be communicating and how we should be handling investors. And my gut instinct was let's reach out to them and just say, like, hey, we don't know what's going on. We heard there's this thing called COVID. We don't know what it means. No one on the face of the planet has ever dealt with a global pandemic. So we don't know what this means for your investment, but we're looking, we're on top of it. And we did a lot of things to insulate from any of the downside that could potentially happen. Little did we know it would be like the biggest boom in real estate pretty much ever immediately following COVID. But we didn't do that initially. And then and I also empathize and understand why my partners were like, let's wait till we have better information. We're gonna get all these questions. We won't know how to answer it. We won't know what's going on. And I understand that. But I know now without question that what we should have done is communicate the way that I had initially suggested. And eventually I got too stir crazy waiting and I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. It's better to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. I sent out an email and the overwhelming positive supportive responses I got from investors was absolutely an indicator that I made the right call there, even though like I said, I had to ask for forgiveness a little bit more than the permission in that instance.
But that's okay. It's okay. You made the action and you took, and clearly it's paid off. And one of the things that I think is super challenging, especially for in the capital raising environment. I don't know if you ever go on Instagram. There's a capital raising guru on every corner of
Yeah.
Instagram. And so all promising, instant gratification, you're gonna go from zero to hero in 6 months, you'll be able to retire your seventh generation. I think Adam Grant says that in a world that rewards instant gratification, discipline is revolutionary. And do you feel that in real estate that long-term thinking is sort of being replaced by these Instagram worthy wins? And how do you combat that?
Think that that is a toxicity of social media culture for sure. It's not true. The way I combat it, right, is I do a lot of education. I talk about this a lot and I tell people, I'm very clear. I don't care where you go to get education. I don't care which guru you follow. I don't care what conference you go to, what VIP ticket you buy, what mastermind, what mentorship. I don't care. That is not the easy button that you think it is. This is hard work. More importantly, when you're raising capital from investors, this is a significant responsibility. You cannot be careless. You cannot be sloppy. You cannot be half assed about it. You have to go into it with intention, with purpose, with discipline. Like Adam Grant said, right? Like discipline is becoming harder and harder to find. But if you can hone that skill and keep your focus, you can be successful. It is not easy, but it is absolutely worth it.
Do you think there should be more regulation in the way that capital raising occurs?
I think that there should be a change in capital raising. What I mean by that is when you go to Instagram, the thing that horrifies me the most is how many well intentioned people teach others, saying they're gurus, that have never done a deal themselves, that haven't raised substantial capital, that haven't been through a down market, that just don't have any kind of formal education. And now all of a sudden they're charging someone 50 grand to learn how to raise capital, but they're doing it the wrong way. The biggest one I see, right, is the broker dealer violation. I see this rule violated left, right, and center. And so
So let's explain that a little more for the listeners who don't know what you know you're talking.
so the broker dealer rule essentially says, the SEC says, and this is for US securities. I'm sure there's some variation in other countries too. But for US securities, it says that you cannot get compensation, transaction based or success based compensation for raising capital. So, what that means, and this is the most common thing I see from the internet superstars, right? What they'll say is they'll be like, oh, we have the loophole to the broker dealer rule. No, you don't. You do not have the loophole. You think you are smarter. You think you have the SEC fool. I don't think that they will see it that way. So, what they'll say typically, right, is they'll say, Steve, bring $1 million to my deal and I'll give you 3% of however much you can raise. If you bring 5 million, I'll give you 3% of that. You cannot do that because it's based on the success of how much you raise. The way that they loophole it, and it is not a loophole, I want to be like so crystal clear about it because I don't want you guys to hear just one thing I say, right? But the loophole that they say exists that does not exist is they'll go, Steve, bring me $1 million and I'll give you 10% of the GP for every $1 million you bring. That is still a violation of the broker dealer rule, unless Steve is a broker dealer. And then they go, what's a broker dealer? And I said, not you. Not you. You don't know if you're a broker dealer. It's not you.
It is right. If you don't know, you're not.
You're not. Yeah. If you don't know, you're not. And so I think that the changes that should be made from the SEC, right, is one, allowing more opportunity for sophisticated investors who are maybe not accredited yet to participate in private placement memorandums. And there was a recent change, right, where there's certain tests you can take to qualify. So I thought that was a really good change. I think that being able to pay capital raisers for raising the capital, it would be good to introduce some kind of ability to do that where I can say, hey, Steve, for every, million you bring me, I'll pay you 10 grand or 20 grand or 30, whatever that is, right? I think that there should be a way to do that, but with a lot of guardrails around it. So maybe there's some kind of a test, or maybe there's some kind of registration or a licensing process. Like, honestly, I wish that there was a licensing process for raising capital because it would really take out a lot of the bad actors.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's so important. I think in the mortgage business, which I'm in the real estate business I am, it always seems that the rules are made for the people who subscribe to them, but not for the people who don't. And
I,
so they cannot enforce on people who are not realtors or mortgage brokers. Well, those are the ones that are violating the rules 9 times out of 10.
I feel like this is like my HOA approvals. I go and I ask for approval and they're like, absolutely not. I'm like, 18 other houses in the neighborhood have done it. They're like, oh, well, they didn't have approval. And I'm like, why did I
I
ask?
know, right?
Like,
And
why
then
did I ask?
I live in a heritage district and we wanted to put board and batten siding, not horizontal siding. And they said, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, I went through the neighborhood and I did a percentage of the neighborhood. And I think it was 57% of the neighborhood has board and batten. He said, well, but they never got approval. So I'm just going to do it.
Just do it. I mean, I'm facing the same issue. I'm like fighting with my HOA right now over.
They're just telling me that they just don't want me to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Then I just won't ask. And I guess this is another instance of asking for forgiveness and not.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think standards are what you accept, not what you set. And that's what they're telling us.
And don't do this with the SEC. Always ask.
Yeah, that's right. That's not what we're saying right now. Don't do that with the.
Always ask permission with the SEC.
Yeah, there's certain bodies that you don't
Yeah.
mess with. Yes.
Yeah.
The Heritage Department, you might get away with it. The
Yeah.
SEC,
Not
probably
so much.
not.
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, that's interesting because I think there's a lot of people who go to these events and I see they spend their last dollar on going to that event and they can barely afford the hotel room, let alone the 10, 12, $50,000 they just spent on their Amex. And then they think that they're going to do capital raising as their single source of income. And is that a thing? Can somebody do that?
I mean, it depends, right? Like, do you need $100,000 a year to live a good life, or do you need $1 million a year, right? It depends. And then, depending on what that looks like, right?
But if they can't get paid to capital raise based on the SEC rules,
So they can still get paid from their capital raising activities. It just can't be the thing that they do for someone else's deal. So, for example, I could have a deal and say, hey, I'll be the operating partner. Steve, you come in, you raise the money, you be my JV partner, and you be the equity partner. That would be totally fine. But you still do have to register with the SEC. You have to register that you're relying on an exemption. So it's an unregistered security, but we still have to tell the SEC, hey, we're selling this unregistered security. So,
and how many of those type of deals do you do today versus what did you do at the beginning?
well, at the beginning, I did more because there were more deals available. So I would do multiple deals in a year. Last year, I did one deal. The year before that, I did one deal. The year before that, I did two. The year before that, I did two. The year before that, I did one. So it just really depends on deal flow. But now the deals I'm doing are large deals, right? Like we close anywhere from 50 to $150 million deals. So these aren't small deals that we're doing. But you absolutely could make a living off of raising capital, especially if you're very good at it. The question is, will you find enough deal flow to deploy that capital? And to make sure, if this isn't a question, this is a statement, if you're going to do it the right way, have a securities attorney. If there's, I'll give you a really great resource. So my securities attorney puts a lot of free content and education on his Instagram. His name is Nick the Lawyer, NIC the Lawyer on Instagram. He does a really good job of breaking down really complex topics that are like easy to digest and then building on them. So it's a good place to get like foundational education, because the biggest challenge I see, or the biggest mistake I see with new investors, is they find the Instagram account that has like 50,000 followers, 5 million followers, whatever it is. And they go, oh, this person has a lot of followers. I'm going to listen to what they say. And oh, they charge 50 grand for a year in their mentorship program. And oh, they have all these testimonials. I'm going to be rich too. You could be. It is definitely possible. I personally don't like to take anybody's last dollar because I don't feel good about it. But I will say, I talk about this so much that I have people now that'll like come to me and go, I didn't tell you that I took a heat lock out on my house because I knew you would say no to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? I absolutely would have said no to you. And, like there's this guy, Andy, who did this. And then he's like, now I've closed on like 3 deals since then. I bought 170 something doors since then. It's the best decision I ever made. Yes, that is the exception, not the rule.
That's right.
And I think it's important. And I think that when you have a platform, right, whether it be a podcast or a social media account, or you speak on stages or whatever it is, you are automatically given a level of credibility that maybe you earned, maybe you didn't, right? Like we don't know for sure. And I think that there comes a big responsibility with that. And we have to be good stewards of the messaging that we are delivering and the way that we are talking about it. And I think it's really important for anyone who goes on Instagram to remember this is the highlight reel of everybody's life. This is not life all the time. This is highly curated. Everybody, puts their pants on the same way in the morning, one leg at a time. So when you see the cars and the planes and the yachts and the bags and the vacations and all the things, the lifestyle things, just know that's just one sliver, maybe, of their life. And a lot of people on Instagram fake that. Like the number of people that I have seen rent Airbnbs to talk about their mansion, or rent the Lambo, or, like I know people who will rent time on a grounded jet just to film content on the private jet to make it seem like they've reached a level of success or, achievement that they really haven't.
It and well, I heavily frown on that. So
Yeah.
that's number one. I can understand what they're trying to do because I know there was a time where I mean, I don't care about material things at all. And I was out, this was the beginning of my real estate career, and I'm out showing houses, and I have this old Volkswagen Jetta. Like this thing is just nasty. But I bought it for like 2,500 bucks, and
Yeah.
it just worked. And I'm driving down this road, and it had a lot of speed bumps on it.
Yeah.
and the back trunk just starts popping open. And my car, because it had shocks, but my car's like twerking as we're going down the street. And my client's following me, and we're going to show this house. And the house is, I don't know, like 800 or a million, something like that. And I pull in with that, and I'm just going, I'm mortified. I'm like, maybe I need to do this. And sure enough, there's another real estate agent there, and he's got his brand new Tesla Model P or whatever. And and my client said, "Oh, he must be really successful." And I looked at it, I was like, I the greatest thing about real estate, I could just look up his transactions.
Yeah.
I made way more than him, probably 3 times as much as that
Yes.
guy.
He's
And and I'm like, but I don't care about that. But the image is so important. When people, they look at the image of success, not the reality of success. And most of the very wealthy people that I've dealt with in any aspect, you would never know when they walk in the room.
Yeah, it's like the classic millionaire next door, right? Like my parents are self-made millionaires. They retired early and my whole life, it wasn't until like the last 5 or 6 years that they had two cars. Before that, they had one car that they just shared between them. And by the way, the car that they shared, my entire childhood, my parents have never owned a new car. And my dad had this thing for like white Nissan Maximas. So that was the car. We always had the white Nissan Maxima. And look, I'll tell you, maybe I'm like my father's daughter. I don't know. But of all the cars that we've ever owned and that we even have now, if you let me choose the car I drive all the time, it is the Kia Telluride. No
Really?
question about it. It is hands down the best car I've ever had. No one will ever convince me otherwise. And when this one is, ready to go to the grave, I'm getting another one. Kia should pay me actually because I like
That's right.
love
That
it.
was a heavy sponsorship right there. That was
I
a
know.
big. You're looking for sponsorship deals.
Yeah,
I
Kia,
get.
reach out to me, Kia. I got you. The ultimate luxury, Kia Telluride.
That's amazing. That's amazing. My probably the most expensive car I ever bought was it was a Model Y Tesla Performance,
Yeah.
but it actually was the cheapest one I ever bought because I got a $55,000. I bought it for 93,000.
Yeah.
I got a $50,000 tax write off. I got all the HST back, and I didn't have to pay for gas, no oil changes, no nothing like that. And so it was actually, while it was the biggest capital outlay.
Yeah.
It was the best return.
Right.
And I kind of think about that when I think about multifamily. Is multifamily is very similar. It's like there's this big, huge capital outlay, but
Yeah.
your return is going to be better because it's more stable than when you look at that smaller one.
Absolutely. And that's why I like multifamily because I think it's significantly less risky than other asset classes.
And so I want to hit with a couple really punchy questions just to kind of to close things off. So, what is the number one myth about multifamily that drives you nuts?
That you have to start in single family first, or that it's for billionaires and millionaires.
And when you look at neighborhoods around the United States, what is the hottest one and what is the least hot today?
Hottest one today is some of the Dallas submarkets. So we just bought an asset in Addison, which is a submarket of Dallas. That is probably one of the top markets you can buy in. The least hot market, oh, that's a hard one. I have a lot of answers for this. Generally, the California markets are not great, but then you carve for San Diego, right? San Diego is doing really well. But like San Francisco, it's really hard in the Bay to make a good return. New York is tough. Even Florida has gotten really hard recently because they have an insurance problem there. Same with a lot of parts of Texas. Houston is really tough now. So it's hard to say the worst, but I think the best is still Dallas by like objective measures. Also, I live here, so I just know it really well.
That makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
Now, what's one belief that you hold to be true that most people in real estate would disagree with?
That's a good question. What is a belief? Well, I don't know that most people would disagree with it, but they won't actively take action toward it, or at least not as much action as I'm willing to take. And that is, I believe unequivocally that women deserve to be in rooms where decisions are being made at the highest levels. And I think that women are I know that they're solid investors, and by every metric that any investor cares about, every metric, women outperform their male counterparts. So that tells me that if you don't have diversity and you don't have women in the room at the decision making levels, you probably aren't working with the best, and I'm not interested in working with the second best.
Well, I love that because my mortgage brokerage is predominantly women, and I agree with you
Work with it.
100%. I want them to lead my business, to be
There you
honest, but
go.
that's a
Yeah.
whole nother discussion. And a quick tip, what's the best way to vet a deal in under 10 minutes?
In under 10 minutes. First and foremost, just look at the business plan. Investors are better at this than they realize. If you look at a business plan and you look at what's the average median income, so what's the average income of the houses in the 1 or 5 mile radius, right? And let's say it's $50,000. Just look at what the business plan is. If they're planning on charging $2,000 in rent after they renovate, who are your tenants going to be? Right? You have to look at it from a pragmatic standpoint and put yourself in the shoes of the tenant that would be living there. So your resident is making about $4,000 a month. Can they afford $2,000 after they pay taxes? And remember, they still have to pay for grocery and insurance and gas and cell phone and all the other things.
The Teleroot.
Right, they can't, the Telluride needs to be paid for, and they can't afford the rent, and so you're gonna have a major occupancy or bad debt or both issue. So that's one thing I would look at. The second thing I would look at is what is the business plan and what is the type of asset that you're buying. So are you buying value add? Are you buying core plus? Anybody who puts a class B value add deal in the US in front of me and is like, oh, we're going to get a 20% plus return. No, you're not. You are wrong, or you don't know that you're wrong. And both are terrifying. So run away from those deals. For today's market, there was a time where we hit 20% all day long. It was easy. And then the third thing I would say is more than vetting the deal. If you're a passive investor, more than vetting the deal, you're vetting your sponsor. You need to know that the person that you're investing with is going to have ethics and morals when they show up to do your deal. And if they cut corners when it comes to raising capital, where else are they cutting corners?
Yeah, if something's showing up in one part of your life, it's definitely showing up somewhere else. And I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Yeah.
If your daughters were listening to this 20
Yeah.
years from now,
Yeah.
what would you want them to know about your journey and why did you do what you did to build what you've built?
Gosh, what an emotional question. I hope that they are proud of me, but more importantly, I hope that the legacy that I leave behind for them is not the money, not the trust fund, not the stuff. I hope that the legacy that I've left for them in 20 years when they go out into the world and try to find their place in the world, I hope that they know that they can always come home, and I've created a safe environment no matter what, whether, you know, they are mad at me, they were fighting, whatever, it doesn't matter. They can always come home. I always tell them, I even tell them this now, the secret to life is there's no problem that we can't try to solve together. And so I want them to always bring me those problems. But the legacy that I want to leave behind for them is a world where they walk into rooms that I am in right now, like private equity rooms and rooms where $100 million deals are happening. And they don't just know that they deserve to be in those rooms, but they know that they belong in those rooms because what I have done, I hope that in 20 years, what I've done, I bought and sold over $1 billion in multifamily in my portfolio. And I hope they look at that and go, so what? So have all these other women. And that's my goal, is to be not remarkable because so many other women are doing the same thing.
I absolutely love that. And that leads me to my last
Yeah.
question. And talking about Rejma Shajwani, she talks about the workplace was not built for working moms. It's time we stop pretending it was.
Yeah.
As a mother, entrepreneur, somebody's redefined leadership in your life and your company, especially with real estate.
Yeah.
When will women be the dominant force at the top?
Not soon enough. So I think this is actually an interesting part of the conversation because everyone's talking about the great wealth transfer that's happening, right? $124 trillion is going to change hands in the next 20 years. The interesting piece that I think is being left out of the discussion is as boomers are dying and transferring those funds, it's actually going to women's pockets first, whether it be wives who tend to outlive husbands or daughters are inheriting more wealth than ever before. And in 5 years, by 2030, US, two-thirds of wealth will be controlled by women for the first time ever. We're going to control more money than we've ever controlled. And I think that this is an important part of the conversation that's not being talked about because women spend money differently, they donate money differently, they care about different metrics than men do. And they tend to care more about altruistic ventures. They tend to care more about ethical investments, sustainable investments. And so, money managers and allocators that are not recognizing this big shift that is coming in the next 5 years, they're the ones that are going to fall behind. So, if you're listening to this and you are going to raise capital or manage money or be an investment advisor of any capacity or broker dealer, right? If you're going to do any of those things, you should be having more conversations around how women behave with money and be researching and understanding that. If you run a business where some of your clientele would be women, these are conversations and things that you should be thinking about. And that's why having women in the room is important, because my perspective is just going to be different than my husband's perspective, right? Like, he doesn't know what it's like to be a working mom or a woman and walking through life. So there are certain blind spots he's just naturally going to have. Perspective is the most powerful tool that any company can have when it's making decisions.
And I think that's so impactful. And I think what you did is you led with number one, you led with data. And then you talked about the results that can happen out of capitalizing on those data to also then benefit the people
Yeah.
who then you're serving with that data.
Yeah.
So I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I think that's you definitely, I really do hope that your impact in the world is meaningless because your daughters are looking into the future saying, well, everybody else does this now.
Me.
And, uh, and so I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I hope it's me. I hope everything I've done is not impressive.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
thank you.
Vita, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.